guys, welcome to another episode of our podcast. Today my guest is Ben Dueck. Ben is a founder and a president at the Cantera. Is it pronounced right, Ben?
Yeah, Cantera. Yeah,
Cantera Leadership. Welcome to the call, Ben, and thank you so much for your time today.
Hey, it's my pleasure, Gurmeet. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
You're welcome to. So tell us a little bit about Cantera Leadership. How does all form and what do you do there?
Yeah, so Cantera Leadership, I do leadership development work, and that's a broad term, I know, but let me first share a little bit about where it came from, the idea of doing Cantera Leadership. So I've been doing leadership development, officially, unofficially for over 20 years. About 12 years ago, I went and got a master's degree in leadership, and it's a very kind of specific degree. Not a lot of people I knew had a master's degree in leadership. Mm-hmm. And people would ask me, like, why are you getting a master's degree in leadership? And I'm like, well, I want to be a better leader and I want to help others around me be better leaders. And then there's always a little part of me that would say, it's almost, it wasn't like I was embarrassed to say it, but I wasn't sure if I should say it out loud. I also want to, maybe one day do a leadership development company, run a leadership development company and launch it. And I think this is a good first step. Yeah. So a couple of years ago, I had that chance to make that decision to launch Cantera Leadership. So in 2019, I decided to take the plunge and launch the business. And so now I work with individuals and teams and organizations and help them kind of do two things. One is really build their teams. I mean, to me, that's a big part of everything is how do you build your team up? How do you have a team that's working together effectively, but also empowering leaders and engaging leaders to take that next step in their development. I believe we all have a gap between where we are and where we could be. And that's not negative to say that because it's just who we are. It's people, right? There's growth that we can have. And so I help people take a step in that gap from, hey, where I am as a leader to where I want to be, where we are as a team to where we want to be, where we are as an organization to where we want to be when it comes to things like culture and team and leadership. Mm-hmm.
So what is the biggest, problem you think in a business side, we handle? Is it on a personal development side, where leadership needs to develop, or is it also translate that into definitely, revenue growth in a business or a more business growth? Is it a more personal side or is it more business side? How do you look at those two different areas?
Yeah, that's a good question because I think that one of the biggest challenges that I hear from a lot of organizations, and I deal with this myself a lot, is that we have so many fires we need to put out, right? The tyranny of the urgent is what it's called. We have so many things that are just on our desk that seem like we need to do right now. Mm-hmm. And then you add all the distractions beyond that, right? So we've got the urgent, plus we've got distractions. And if we're dealing with teams, we're dealing with their distractions and their urgency. We often feel like we don't have time to invest, or just a time factor, let alone a cost factor, to invest in some of those intangibles, those things that seem like maybe one day we'll get to that. Maybe one day we'll build our teams, or one day I'll take some time to invest in my leadership, but I got too much to do right now. And I think we forget that the exponential return when we actually take some time to build our teams, to build our leaders, it brings about more profitability in the long run. It brings about higher engagement. We reduce our turnover. All these things that cost us money, we are so tied up with the urgent things on our desk that we kind of say, oh, I can't do that right now. I can't do that right now. I can't do that right now. I say we should do that right now. Yeah. It's going to make a bigger difference in the long run. It's going to actually take some of that urgent things, those fires that we have on our desk. It's probably going to take some of those and get rid of them because we've built stronger teams, we've built stronger capacity ourselves. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure if that answered your question, but that's kind of the way I see things.
I see my space, Ben, definitely when you have a line, team that everybody's on the same page and leadership set, happening, you see teams become more productive. You definitely see, and that productivity becomes definitely, part of the revenue growth, right? So, everybody's on the same page, they are pulling for the same goals. You produce a lot more work that way, right?
Yeah. I was just going to say roughly, and the studies that they've showed is that there's only about 20% of employees out there that are engaged at work. And and there's roughly 20% that are disengaged, and then there's a big group in the middle. But if you think of the difference between an engaged person on your team and a disengaged person on your team, the engaged person is operating, at 110% effectiveness. They're excited about what they do every day. They're working above and beyond what you expect. The disengaged person is the person who is almost sabotaging their role, right? They're almost intentionally not doing any work. They're on their phones lots during the day. They're taking long bathroom breaks, all those kind of things where you're not getting much out of them. And so if you can't move someone from disengaged towards engaged, or even just disengaged to kind of that middle bracket of, just being a part of your team compared to highly engaged, you're losing money, you're losing profitability, you're losing effectiveness.
You just touched a very sensitive, topic, and that's I'm dealing with that, all day long as well. Disengaged, staff, employees at work. How do you handle that? Look at what's going on with the, social media. Definitely what's going on in society itself. There's so many, different forms of distractions. There's so many issues. So a lot of complex issues that that the people are going through. Especially with the COVID. So how do you keep those people engaged? I thought number was even lower than 20% but if it's even that number, 80% of the workforce, that's a big number. If you can get something that much higher number, so how do you handle that? It's just a leadership, or is it something more than leadership that you gotta handle?
Well, I'll answer it with a story that I heard once. So a lot of people know Jim Collins, Good to Great. He wrote that book, and one of the things that he did a number of years ago is he told his team, he said, go and find out what's the biggest difference in companies that succeed. Like what's the biggest difference? And he told his team, but whatever you come back with, don't come back and tell me it's leadership, because that's just that's cliche, right? That's just, I don't want to hear that. He told his team. So just go research, go talk to all those amazing companies, and then come back and tell me what the difference is between those amazing companies and those not amazing companies. Yeah. And so the team came back to him after they'd done all the research, and they said, Jim, you don't want to hear this, but the biggest factor between those organizations that are doing well and those ones that are not doing well is leadership. So it rises and falls with leadership, right? You hear it, right? It all flows downhill, the good or the bad, it all flows downhill, right? Yeah. And so I think that it does factor in with leadership. But let me flesh it out a little bit further for you and your listeners. So what does that mean, right? What do you mean? How do you have a leader? What is being a leader who inspires and engages their team looks like? Well, there's been some other research done around that, and it was done by Gallup, a company that does a lot of research and polling around the world. And they talked to over 10,000 kind of normal people, right? Just the average worker and the average job kind of thing. And they asked them, what do you want from your leaders? And they came up with, lots of responses, but they compiled it down to like the 25 most common words that came through. And it wasn't words like, sense of humor or charisma or things like that, but they compiled it into 4 key concepts or words. And they said this, that people want trust, compassion, stability, and hope from their leaders. Okay? So if you have a leader you can trust, you're going to feel way better about working for them. Right? Because you know what you're going to get. If you have a leader that provides stability for you, so even in the midst of COVID, for example, did the leader provide some stability? Maybe not saying that things are going to be perfect. That's not what I mean. That's not lying, right? But maybe did they project a confidence and a stability in saying, hey, my job is going to be taken care of because of the leader that I have? Did they show compassion? Right? Does my leader seem to care about me? They don't need to be lovey-dovey and hugs and kisses. Some people might do that, and that's fine. But some people aren't that, and that's okay too. But you can still show compassion to your team. And then hope. What's the vision for the future? Where are we going? And does that get my team excited? If you think of those 4 principles, I mean, simple words to think of, but if you're a leader in an organization and you can ask yourself, hey, how do I build trust, compassion, stability, and hope within my team? You're going to naturally draw some of those people forward. So there's other things as well that people can do, but to me, if someone's listening to this right now and they want to take, a simple concept with them, trust, compassion, stability, and hope. Remember those 4 concepts in your leadership, you're going to start seeing your team grow. Nice.
How do you see that, a lot of young force, especially where we are in Ontario, it's a tech hub now, a lot of technical staff as well. What are your thoughts on that previous, a little bit, mature workforce, or the new, generations coming in, millennials coming into workforce? I manage a lot of young people as well. I feel that, our generation, or especially my generation, was not so demanding on that. But the new generation coming in the workforce, they're almost demanding that. They need to know the brand. They need to know where you stand as a business leader. They demand more of that. It's more clear to them that what they're looking for when they look for employer. What do you see the difference in that? Is that where they go, where that we going in the workforce, or what are your thoughts on those two?
Yeah, well, it's interesting, right? Because I still talk with a lot of people who are still trying to understand how to work with millennials, right? And we're not only working with millennials now, we're into the next generations beyond that. And in fact, people are still asking that question: how do we work with millennials when the millennials are, and I forget the percentage offhand, but the percentage of millennials in the workforce is the highest, higher than any other generation right now. And yet people are still wondering, like, how do I figure out how to work with this next generation and what's changing? Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. It's a big question. And I think the big thing that I think of when I consider that what you're asking is, how do we switch our mindset? It used to be that people were just loyal to their job, right? I just have a job and I'm loyal to my job. I'm going to punch my clock 9 to 5. If I get my paycheck, I'm happy, right? Just give me my paycheck. I'll do whatever you ask me to do because, like, I just know that having a job is a job, and it's a job, and it's a job, it's a job, and I have a job, right? People get excited about that, but it's changing. And so it's not just about paycheck anymore. Like, people want to and have purpose to their role, to their organization. They want to know how they fit within that organization, right? They don't want to just be having a job. They want to be developed in their job. They don't want to just be stuck in one spot. They don't want to have a boss. They want to have a coach. They want to have someone who cares and develops them. They want to have, instead of focusing on weaknesses and everything that you're doing wrong, they want to be able to have people focus on what they do well and their strengths that they have. And then it's not just our job anymore. Our job is a part of our life, and it's more intertwined than it used to be. It's not just about punching the clock, and especially now with working virtually. Your life and your job are so connected that as leaders, we need to recognize that it's not going to work the same way it did, 20 years ago, 40 years ago. And we need to change how we approach the people on our team, because it's not surprising if we don't give them purpose. It's not surprising if we don't, coach them through things, that they're going to leave and go find somewhere that does. Yeah.
I mean, people have a much higher potential that they deliver work on. I always wonder that, if I can engage these, my staff or teams in a level where they can deliver even very near close to their potential, what could have happened to the company? How far can you go? Because all you're doing is, they're producing the work with the numbers you've given them, the quota you've given them. But instead of quota, can you target their potential? And what do you have to do in order to get to their potential? That will excel your company in a totally different direction. If you can get even near their potential, that you can get a work out of it.
Yeah, and that's huge, right? And so one of the things that I've done with a lot of organizations is I've worked with their teams, and I've used the Clifton Strengths assessment tool. If you're familiar with Clifton Strengths at all, it's a great way to kind of have this common language and common understanding of what makes each person tick, right? Because when you talk about potential, what's their area of greatest potential? And the Clifton Strengths assessment it's not a personality assessment. It's more of a talent and potential assessment. Because if you're dealing with someone and you don't understand what makes them tick, what motivates them, how do you get the best from them, you're gonna, even if you have that passion to have that different focus, you're not gonna be able to get the best from them without understanding them more, right? So even if you don't take the assessment, if you can't answer questions like, hey, what motivates Bob, right? Like, as an example, how do I get the best out of Julie? Like, what's going to frustrate her more than anything else, right? What kind of roles does Julie or Bob fit into in an ideal way? Because everyone is uniquely wired. So Gurmeet, me and you, if we were approaching the same problem and trying to come to the same outcome, we would go about getting to that outcome very differently between the two of us, right? Because we're both unique. There might be some similarities. You might do something the same as me, and we might do something the same, and we might have the same approach, but we're each going to bring a different unique talent or different unique strengths to get there. And maybe we both succeed, but how we succeed would be different.
Wow. That requires a lot of work on the leadership part. You got to understand people much deeper level that you understand, right? It's a lot more hard work from a business standpoint. does that mean business leaders have to learn different skill sets? They have to grow themselves first, so they can have that skill set where you can listen, understand people at a different level. How does that change on a personal development side? A business leader have to, now they have to polish their skill set.
Yeah, well, I think that's exactly, you said it exactly right. Because so often people who've been exceptional individual achievers then get put into leadership roles, right? They're an exceptional programmer, an exceptional salesperson, an exceptional whatever. And then they get promoted into a leadership role, and it changes because that was an individual role in many ways, right? You might interact with others, but your success was a lot dependent on yourself. Now, all of a sudden, you're put in a position where your success depends on how well everyone that reports to you does, right? So absolutely, a completely different skill set that's involved. And most organizations don't invest in that new role for that person. They just kind of leave it. I think the statistics around something like 60 or 70%, I don't remember specifically, but somewhere around there, of people who've been put into leadership roles and manager roles have never been trained to be what it means to be a leader. And there is different skills. It's, like you said, self-awareness and self-leadership is the first point start, and that's where I always start with leaders in that area first. Hey, let's talk about you as an individual, what kind of strengths and talents you have. But then it's how do you build relationships and connections? How do you engage and motivate your team? How do you establish clear expectations? You provide good feedback, coach them through things, build accountability, and just develop who they are, develop their strengths, develop their talents into being the best person they can be. And that's a mindset shift from, hey, it's not just about me anymore. It's how do I get the best from these people? You sometimes have to pull away from the tasks, the things that you used to do. Like if you were a developer or a programmer, you may have to stop doing as much coding and stop doing as much of that and spend more time with people and just get the best from your people. And that's a shift.
Yeah, that's a entirely different skill set. I totally agree with you. And especially in my space, a lot of companies are started by somebody who was very good at their technical job.
Yes.
They were very good at that. And they said, okay, I got to get into business. So now you hire people. It's a totally different skill set. Now they, they're not the expertise not technical anymore. They're the expertise something, getting a work out of somebody else. That's a huge. What do you see the people, challenges, when they go through this transition now, Ben? What are they facing? The challenges is simply information, or is it a process? Is it or they just need to learn new skill set? That's where the personal, challenges come from. Where do you see these people struggle most of the time?
Yeah, so a lot of the leaders that I talk to, one of the first kind of barriers they need to overcome is kind of recognizing the value of intentional leadership steps, right? Like, what does it mean to lead? And so what I often encourage leaders to do, especially if they're new leaders that have moved from a technical role into a leadership role, is to ask them, okay, how much time are you spending in a week just thinking about what it means to be a leader and lead your team? And usually it's like, oh, I don't have time for that. I don't have time for that. I'm solving all these problems, right? The stuff that's on the fires they're putting out. And I said, okay, so let's just stop for a second. What would it look like if you just took 15 minutes once a week to just put yourself into a leadership mindset of just saying, it's like you put on your leadership hat and just think, how do I lead my team? What does Bob need from me? What does Julie need from me? Spend 15 minutes once a week. That's it. And they're like, oh, I don't know. I guess I can do that. 15 minutes. And they begin to shift their idea of what is important for them to do. It changes from, hey, I don't need to solve this coding problem. Maybe at some point I will, or still do, or I support it. But it shifts it from saying, I don't need to solve this coding problem. What I need to do is motivate Bob the best way I can motivate Bob, and engage Bob the best way I can engage Bob, and lead Bob the best way that I can lead Bob, and coach Bob the best way I can coach Bob, so that Bob is able to excel. And if he's able to excel, it goes back to what you said about having getting the greatest potential, building the greatest potential in your people. That's your role as a leader. That's more important than solving that coding problem.
That's a hard work. Solving a coding problem is easy. You can help them to solve the problem, but putting the hat on of a leadership, that's a hard work. But I think that's where the work comes in. That's what make you shine in a longer run. But there's a lot of work involved in that coaching person. That doing work yourself because you're so good at that. It's a natural instinct. You're gonna go jump in a problem and you're gonna solve a problem for your staff. You're gonna help them out to get over the problem. but understanding and getting the work through them and coaching them, that's a lot of hard work.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the things that makes it hard is that leadership, it's almost more of an art than a science, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, programming or, fixing something like an IT challenge or, that's defined, right? It's a very defined thing. Like, here's the problem, here's the solution. There's logic, there's steps that you can take, and there's problem solving steps. Leadership, while there are some principles that I've shared already, a few of them, and there's some things that you need to do, it's how you do some of that is kind of an art, right? You're painting a picture, and you can't tell someone exactly how to paint a picture. Sometimes you have to figure it out and try to navigate that, and that's hard for a lot of leaders, which is why I love doing what I do, because I can help navigate that with them so that they're able to get the best from their teams and get the best from themselves in that whole art of leadership.
Very interesting. Let's talk about COVID. How does COVID change on impact on our leadership? We used to manage people or used to coach people. In a one room, you put everybody and you have a chat with them. You coach them. Now everybody's decentralized. Some are with the calls, but similar to what you and I are doing, or some are working from home, some from office. How did that create a challenge on our leadership? How to manage people, how to coach people, and how to get a work out of them?
Yeah, well, I think the big thing that came in the very beginning of the pandemic that actually came through in a lot of the studies that they were doing is that teams actually became higher engaged in the first part of the pandemic. And part of the reason why they became higher engaged is because I think a lot of leaders and managers understood when that change happened, when it's also now, hey, we're working virtual and there's all this stress and all this pressure, there was this kind of instinctive reaction from a lot of organizations to be like, oh, we have to care for our people more, right? Mm-hmm. Now, the engagement numbers have dipped down a little bit since then. I think that a lot of organizations have kind of started to fade off of that urgency, right? That urgency to kind of care for their team. Yeah. And so I think that's something that I would encourage teams, especially working virtually, is to not let go of that kind of new or renewed focus that came when the pandemic came about of caring for your people and trying to make sure that you're meeting them where they're at. Mm-hmm. When you work with people virtually, one of the challenges is that you tend not to have as much connection time with them, right? Because you're working on your own, and you might tune into a meeting once a day or once a week, depending on what your team rhythm is. But you're not having those kind of water cooler conversations, right? Where you both walk down the hallway, you grab a water or you grab a coffee, or you're walking down the hall and you stick your head in someone's office and say, "Hey, how's it going, Gurmeet? Good to see you again today. How's life?" Those kind of things. So our interactions tend to be less often, and the interactions we do have tend to be just very task focused. Oh, Gurmeet, how's that project going? Did you get that done yet? Did you? And it becomes about that and misses the personal side. So my encouragement for a lot of leaders is to be a lot more intentional about the connecting times with their teams. So with individuals, not even in group sessions. When's the last time you've had a one-on-one conversation with each of your team members? Those kind of things. You should have those more often than you probably are. Oh, I don't have time for that. Well, no, you need to make time for that. Exactly. Because that's what people need. Especially
everybody's going through, on a personal level, so many challenges, so many health issues, so many different challenges. And I think you're absolutely right about that. That when the workload comes in, we simply talk about work on a call. See, how's that project going? How are we taking care of this client? So that personal conversations that definitely miss. And early on, we had a lot of those, but I think as fatigue came in with the Zoom calls and the team calls, definitely that personal touch, it seems to be a missing piece.
Yeah, I think so. And I think you need to look for creative ways as leaders in your organizations, look for creative ways to build that in. And it might be, intentionally asking or leaving time for personal connection in those team meetings. But you might also every once in a while, hey, no one uses the phone anymore, but sometimes a phone call even is different than a Zoom call, right? Because the pressure of a Zoom call is, you have to be on, you have to, what are your facial reactions like? What's your body language like? A phone call, there's a little more casualness to a phone call these days compared to what it used to be, as an example. Or maybe you send them something in the mail, right? Now we're working with people around the world sometimes. So, log into the local Amazon outlet and send them their favorite, favorite snack or something in Amazon to build that connection, that personal connection. So they know, oh, Gurmeet cares for me. He just sent me a box of chocolates, my favorite chocolates. That's so cool. Just be creative with those kind of things, building that personal touch that people are like, hey, yeah, this is good.
So business leaders, like myself listening right now, our conversation, or how do they find a balance? Not finding a balance, but there's so much pressure right now with the business leaders. We lost revenue, we lost a year of in our productivity. We're trying to get back, we're trying to scale up again, and now we get a pressure. Definitely, the same time you gotta be effective leader. You gotta be better leader and coach, team, because you're trying to scale up your team, not only revenue but also trying to scale up your team. You need to bring more people in. So those two challenges, at the same time we're facing those challenges. So how do business leaders go about it? Can you advise them?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a one size fits all kind of piece of that, but I think that I'll use a word that I used earlier. It's just intentionality, and it's trying to make sure that in the midst of the chaos, because it's chaos in lots of ways, right? And sometimes it's good chaos sometimes, but it's still chaos. It's how intentional are we being with doing the things that we know are having a deep impact, right? There's a difference between a surface impact and a deep impact within our organization, right? Yeah. To me, a deep impact are some of the things that we've been talking about, leadership, building culture, building team, those kind of things. If you have no intentionality around those things, you're going to have challenges and an impact later on this. It'll affect the surface is what I'm trying to get at, right? It'll affect both levels of everything. And you're going to feel like, I just seem to not get any traction. I'm just not getting any traction on the surface things. A lot of that is because the roots of what you're doing in your organization aren't strong. So be intentional to make sure you're building some of those roots and not forgetting about those roots in the midst of everything that's on the surface.
Wow. That's so important. You gotta find a balance. You need to, I think the business leaders, the challenge right now, they gotta do both. They need to build the teams, and also they gotta at the same time, excel in the revenue. There's a pressure on revenue. Without revenue, there's no the businesses. You gotta generate the revenue. And a lot of businesses, they have to innovate in product. They need to come up, the new services. You have to totally change the portfolio you had before, after, COVID. Now they're trying to come up with that. There's so many different ways that business leader pressure with, but they need to excel in all different skill set, which comes back to the personal development. Are you capable of handling all of those things, or are you going to be challenged with the personal side that you can't handle some of those pressures, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's so key. And it goes back to what I said earlier with that Jim Collins saying that it all starts and stops with leadership, right? That's the biggest factor. And other research has reinforced that. Even if you think of not even just yourself as maybe the main leader, but other leaders in your organization, they talk about 70% of the engagement of your team is based on the leader or the manager. 70% of the impact is based on that position, right? So if we're not growing those things, it's going to make everything else seem way harder because people are disengaged. There's no culture, there's no intention, there's no real desire for growth. It's going to feel like you're just spinning tires.
Okay. So let's talk about on a personal challenge in a business leader, because I go through a lot of that stuff. Is it simply getting information and be coached on someone like you, Ben, or is it finding a process what works, or is it just simply taking care of yourself and shedding your brain a little bit and getting a more focus? What are those few key areas where business leaders need to work at and to excel at these things? Because they know the business very well, they know technical side, the work they can get it from somebody else, but what are the personal side of things they have to work on? Especially with the health challenges, what's going on out there, a lot of fitness centers are closed. So what are some of the key things business leaders have to do want to work on themselves so they can get better focus?
Yeah, no, and that's a really good question. And I think that I a couple things come to mind that someone can work on. And I think a big thing, and you've kind of, even how you asked the question, you hinted at it a little bit, is that leaders need to make sure that they are finding balance for themselves when it comes to their own well-being and their own health, because that affects your mental energy, it affects your physical energy, and they're all intertwined, right? So often we think that, if we're working long days and having short nights, 5 hours of sleep and, eating unhealthy because we don't have time to eat and we don't have time to cook something, we don't that's not really, I'm doing that because I need to be effective at work. Well, if you're not healthy in how you balance that all out, you're actually going to be less effective in the time you invest, right? So if you're working 18-hour days, your 18 hours are going to be less efficient, less effective, less profitable than if you have some of that balance. So I think that I'd encourage a lot of leaders to do that. Just kind of, hey, look at where can you make sure that you're making the time you need to have the energy you need. What's your sleep patterns like? What's your eating patterns like? And it's, I'm not about, some people want to, lose weight. That's great. That's not what I'm talking about. It's not just like lose weight, but it's how do you just have good well-being, good wellness in your life? So that'd be one factor that I'd look at and encourage people. Another factor, and you mentioned it a little bit as well too, is, do you find a coach or do you not find a coach? I'm a little biased because I do a lot of coaching and leadership coaching. I think everyone should have a coach. I've got a coach myself. I think every leader, especially a leader like a CEO leader leading their organization. And I'm not talking like only about a business coach. You can get a business coach as well, but you can get coaches that dig beyond just how to build your business. It's how to build yourself as a person. So I encourage people to find a coach that fits for them in that way. And then I think it's just making sure that they set up some systems and some times where they're able to step back from the chaos. And so I encourage people to set up, like from a leadership perspective, I talk about that 15-minute chunk. I think if you're a CEO of a company and you don't set aside at least 60 minutes a week where you're able to unplug from all those other things, all those other pressures and the chaos and the distractions, and just focus. I would say if you can find, 15, 20 minutes every day, but hey, you need a time like that. And that's built into routines. You're going to be selling yourself short because you're not going to give yourself the time that you need to focus on those deep things that affect your business.
Yeah, that one of the things I do, Ben, and that is, before 6 o'clock, I wake up early, but the time before 6 o'clock, the couple hours, you just focus on yourself. That's when I gain clarity in those hours more than I would gain in all day.
It's huge.
Close your eyes, either read a book, whatever you have to do. But, those 2 hours, probably 5 to 7, those 2 hours, I just invest those hours in the, that is the only way I can gain focus. I tried many different times of the day. I tried many different other techniques, but I think everybody works differently. For what works for me is those early morning hours. Either going to gym. I used to go to gym. Now there's no gyms open. So you find a way to either go for a walk or something and focus on yourself. And I find all the decisions I need to make, I need to clarity, I need to gain. I can gain in those 2 hours, and during the day it's all transactional.
Yeah, that's huge. And I'd encourage people who are taking steps like that, and that's a great example, to take small steps to get towards that, right? So sometimes when we set goals on, hey, I'm going to now spend an hour every morning to be focused and get that clarity, and I'm going to wake up at 4 a.m. and all those kind of things. It's overwhelming, and our brains actually, from a physiological standpoint, neuroscience standpoint, our brains don't like big changes. So how can we do small steps to get to where we know we want to be, right? That gap between where we are and where we can be. If we can take those small steps, we're going to start seeing actual behavioral change in how we go about leading and how we go about running our business. So small steps.
Very interesting. So let's talk about your journey, Ben. I know you shared a little bit that, how you started, Cantera Leadership. But before that, what you were doing before, if you can just walk you through your journey and how you get to the leadership.
Yeah, I went on a journey that got me to where I am in maybe a way that lots of people wouldn't expect. So my first, first kind of job. I mean, I had many jobs as a teenager and growing up, but the one that I kind of look at as the start to my career and especially impacting people, I actually worked in a church. I was a youth pastor. I worked with young people and helping them to kind of develop, right? And what does it mean for them to step into, the gap between where they are and where they could be, and helping them navigate that. And I really enjoyed doing that. And I continued doing that. I worked in a summer camp where I was working with a lot of young leaders in the summer camp, and I developed a leadership development program. And then I had a few other stops running my own business for a little while, a construction company, developing condos and houses up here in Canada. And just continued to have these times where I was learning a lot about myself in the midst of being an entrepreneur and running my own business. But also having these times where I needed to learn how to engage the people I was working with, the contractors that I worked with, and how to get the best from them, which continued to kind of trigger those thoughts in my own head as to kind of launching a business doing leadership development. And then I worked in a Chamber of Commerce network for a while. I did some fundraising in a different organization for a little while. And it was around that time period when I was with the Chamber of Commerce where I really started to see businesses that had challenges in front of them. And I loved being in the Chamber of Commerce because I could help them figure out what steps to take moving forward. And I noticed, kept coming back to, the biggest barrier was usually leadership, management, whether it was the CEO or junior managers or whatever the case was. And so that just triggered my passion for, hey, I need to do this for people. I need to do this full time and empower people. So that got me to where I am right now. And the name Cantera is based on a town I grew up in, had quarries, limestone quarries. Okay. And Cantera is the Spanish word for quarry. And so I thought, hey, that's cool. I can call it Cantera. And I had actually, my construction company was also called Cantera. So I kept it for this company because I thought when you think of leadership and building teams, it's really almost like you're, digging and building, mining, quarrying for the gems, for the key pieces of stone that you really want to build upon. So I view that as why I like the Cantera Leadership name. So.
Interesting. That's a great, in my mind, that's a great service that you provide to people that, somebody can, always look for, hey, I'm doing this in life, what's my potential? Maybe my potential is a lot more than that. I'm always wondering. And if people like, if you can help people to really achieve or even at least perform on potential, I think that's a huge gift that you can give it to any individual that, hey, listen, you 20%, but here's your potential is another 80%. Let me pull you towards that potential. So if you can share, what is the leadership challenge you had to go through, to get to where you are? So you probably face some of the leadership challenges building your company now, or even before that. What are the challenges you had to go through?
Yeah, which one should I pick? I mean, there's so many. So I think I'll answer two parts of it. One, and it's really come true, and any entrepreneurs that are watching this will know that the biggest barrier to success for an entrepreneur is themselves. And so for me, when I launched in 2019, I was reminded that the only real person that's going to stop me from succeeding is the barriers that I have up, right? The self-discipline that I have, am I able to motivate myself? Am I able to create a compelling vision that gets me going in the mornings, right? And so really needing to recognize that, hey, it's really rests on my shoulders to take this seriously. And I'm still learning that, and it's been a couple of years now since I launched. I'm still learning how to do that. So that's one piece. The second piece that I'll share is when working with teams, and it's something where I had to recognize that I needed to spend more time thinking of how to get the best for my team. Because I was working with teams of various sizes. And so often I got stuck in doing the things that were on my, the fires to put out on my desk, the things that I thought that I needed to do, and I would forget about the people. And so I think that was a challenge I need to and I'm a people person. Like I love people. Like that's been my whole life. But even in some of the, I'm thinking of two specific situations where I was not focused enough on my people, and I need to get to that level that I could focus more.
Yeah, and so when you try to get over your challenges, you can help other people how to get over those challenges as well, right? I think that's how that's a great help. Next up, who do you look for in a leadership information? You look at who's some good leaders in the world that you think that are doing very well in a world, either author or in your space or any other space that you think, yeah.
Well, I'll answer it in two ways, and the answer I usually have given is that I always point to my grandfather. As a leader that I respected and admired. He passed away just a few months ago, but up till then, thank you. I still point to him as an example because he was an inspirational leader, but he always put people first, and he cared, he served people around him, and he made a difference in a lot of lives. So he's my kind of number one filter. The second filter, there's so many positive resources out there. I'm a big proponent of the material around Gallup, the company Gallup, the material they put out around leadership and how to engage your teams. I am a Gallup certified Clifton strengths coach, so I use that in a lot of the material and work that I do. But they just have a way of digging down into the stuff that they've researched, the effectiveness of how to get the best out of your people.
Very interesting. Yeah, I looked up from your site. You had a link to Gallup and very interesting information. It looks like they do a lot of research and try to bring the objectivity to some of the issues we were just talking about. Interesting. What book would you recommend for people who were willing to learn a little bit more on leadership or looking to for self-improvement?
Yeah, so I think from a leadership perspective, managing perspective, a book that you can look at is It's the Manager. It's put out by Gallup. Depending on the size of your company, some stuff in there might be more for larger companies, but there's a really good gems in there as to how to get the best from your team. So I'd say look at that one. Some of the other ones, just in personal development, Atomic Habits. A lot of the work I do when I'm coaching and leading, walking teams through things, is how do you make incremental changes in behavior. And Atomic Habits really digs into that so you can actually grow in ways that your brain doesn't sabotage you on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was an interesting book. You bring it to very, very small pieces when you're trying to change your behavior, right? So yeah, I thought it was a very interesting book. Nice. Yeah. Good stuff. Very interesting. The business leaders who are listening to, I'm definitely encouraged that, when we making our leadership decisions or any other decision in a company, there's always blind spots. And we need people like you, simply say, hey, there could be some blind spot because you can see that, but we can't see that when we're running a business, right? So somebody like you can simply spot that, hey, listen, go in this direction, maybe, or let's try this direction. So there's always, you always come short when you're making a decision on many different things. That's where I think that business leader challenge with. There's so many decisions they have to make, and without that coaching and helping, that very hard to make those decisions. Very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where can people find you? How can they connect with you?
Yeah, so I have a website, canteraleadership.com, and Cantera is Cantera. But you can also find me on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way. I do a lot of my interactions there. I post a lot during the week on there as well. So just find me on LinkedIn. And if you were watching this, send me an invite and say you saw me on Gurmeet's vlogcast or whatever we call this thing these days.
Yeah, no, we send this video to all our contacts, business leaders. I know, and I'll put your information right below that video as well in an email. They can click a link and they can connect with you. And I will definitely encourage business leaders to just connect with you and have a chat with you. Definitely, I gain many different perspectives. Talking to you. Definitely, looking at from a leadership standpoint, there's always more to gain. More we can do ourselves, better we can help our teams, right? So I think everybody needs to work on themselves, figure out what's going to work for you and chat with somebody like you and gain some different perspectives.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. And I'd be happy to have a conversation with anyone that wants to. I mean, I love meeting new people too. So it just gives me a chance to hear about them too.
Good stuff. Thank you so much for your time, Ben.
Thank you, Gurmeet.
Have a good one.
Yeah.